The Greeks talked about writers as makers and as seers, and we still tend to think of writers as writing pieces that rely on hard work, on having to revise and having to edit to make a text. Or sometimes we think of them as visionaries, seers like William Blake or Alice Walker, who say that their characters and ideas came to them in visions or visitations. But for all of us, writing can be hard work that relies on working through stages. It moves through from what Linda Flower called writing-based prose to reader-based prose when we begin to think about others and trying to communicate to them. This is writing to communicate, something that we focus on in every writing class. It's one of the essential skills of an educated person. But we also know that writing itself can lead to inspiration and to learning. We've all worked on a piece and suddenly found it telling us what we need to say, as if writing is a way of communicating with ourselves. This element should also be part of our writing experiences. It's called writing to learn. The Greek word for text was textus, meaning the woven thing. Inside texts are writers working out meaning for themselves and finding ways to communicate that meaning to others.
The reason that general education embraces writing across the curriculum is because the provost charged the General Education Task Force in the spring of 2005 with the job of coming up with a signature general education program that is conversant with the national standards, the emerging standards for general education, but also that recognizes the unique history and situation of higher education at Appalachian State. And that's exactly what the task force did.
The vertical writing model we created because we wanted students to have a chance to write every year. The program that we had been following before that had students write pretty much in their first years, because most students took English 1000 and English 1100 when they were freshmen. And then, even though we knew that students would write in different classes throughout the majors, there really wasn't any connection between the writing that would occur in junior and senior year and what students had done the freshman year.
We had a core curriculum in place that went back at least 30 years. It had been revised slightly just over 20 years ago to bring in designators, and those designators really were very well intended. And if we had actually kept up with those designators for writing and cross-disciplinary studies and all of the other designators, and had kept up with them in the sense that we assessed what student outcomes were actually being achieved, we wouldn't have needed much, well, some of the parts of the new general education program.
One of the things we knew was that students would benefit by having a lot of practice in writing. It's just like everything else. The more you write, the better you're going to be. And we felt that students often didn't see connections between what they'd done in freshman comp and what they wrote later if they were introductory chemistry majors or if they were senior geography majors.
So part of the reason that the Gen Ed Task Force spent a lot of time on writing across the curriculum and came up with the program that they did is because we knew that there was no assessment going on. We knew also that the instruction that was taking place currently was in some cases uninformed of the requirements for a true writing course. So the new general education program in all its components, including writing, requires that courses be regularly evaluated and that assessment guide modification of the courses and the content.
So now what we have is a first-year course, which is Introduction to Composition. One of the big challenges of that course is to help students learn to develop a voice and to be able to make choices about writing, and also to practice some of the basic skills that are necessary for college writing, particularly the kind of skills that are associated with documentation and research. In the second year, students now take a course called Introduction to Writing Across the Curriculum. And that course is a big challenge for our teachers as well as for our students. What we're trying to do is to find different avenues to helping students prepare for whatever writing they do in whatever major they take. And particularly to learn how to analyze texts. So there's a lot of reading in the course, and it's reading in many different disciplines. And to be able to learn some different inquiry skills that will enable them to make the transition to the major. Then in junior year, in the major, students are required to take a WID course, which is Writing in the Discipline. And that course introduces them to whatever major through writing. And then in the senior year, there's a capstone course. And the capstone course could include lots of experiences. It might be an internship, for example, but it will have a writing component. In some cases, the writing component will be reflective writing. In some cases, it might be a huge research project that requires writing all semester long. That depends upon the major. Eventually, the last piece of our vertical writing model will be e-portfolios. And we're starting work on those this year and hope to institute them in the composition course starting next fall for all students, so that students will at least have an e-portfolio of all their writing from English 1000 and 2001 in 3 years from now. And we're hoping many majors will be interested in doing that and picking it up. Some majors have already come to us and told us that they're interested, and we'll be working with those people this year.
If you're going to be involved in performance, then I think it's very important that you be able to communicate your ideas about what you think the play is about, or what you think your character should or shouldn't do, or the choices that you're making, and being able to defend those ideas and communicate them through writing.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is having a voice, which hopefully you come out of composition with, and knowing what your authority is, what areas you feel really competent in, and knowing when to say, I don't know enough about this, I need to go get help with this, and knowing again who your audience is and being able to anticipate what their needs are.
Well, in mathematics, at least in pure mathematics, writing is the heart of pure mathematics. So that is proofs, which is a way to logically demonstrate that something's true, is the content of pure mathematics. And proof is not just somebody thinks of a logical demonstration in their head. It has to be a communication, and it has to convince people. So the writing of the proof is as important as abstractly creating it in some way.
My students, they have these little ticks in their writing where what they're doing is they're basically saying, you know, I'm not very confident what I'm trying to say, and they try to qualify that by making these moves of saying, I think, I feel, I believe, I may not be right, who knows, you know, that sort of thing. But what I try to teach students is, you know, to be confident and to own what they do say, and I think that's an important skill.
Another essential skill that they have to know and learn is the connection between learning and between writing, that writing is a process of learning, thinking critically, and discovery, and that writing isn't just a byproduct of thought.
So proof should be convincing, and so what is convincing? What might convince me may not convince you, and ideally proofs should have something more than that in them. They should be something that is not just a string of 50 pages of demonstrations, but something that really answers a question somebody wanted to know about. So something that answers why, and even more ideally, something that's elegant in some way. So a proof can be beautiful. Sometimes that means it's a shorter proof, or instead sometimes makes you think of a connection to something else in a way that just is amazing.
I teach my students, it's a lot like poetry. You're getting a lot said in a really short space. I teach them you only have this much real estate in the world, this one piece of paper to convey who you are to someone, and that may be the only thing someone else knows about you that makes the difference between whether you get an interview with this job that is your dream job or not. So, you know, every line counts, every space counts, every character counts. How good can you make it? How close to who you really are can you make it?
Usually they want to write a nice long synopsis of the play and fill up about a page with all these details about the storyline. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in them writing critically and telling me what they see and then what they think about what they see.
One of the biggest things, I think, is a misconception of what writing is and what writing does. You know, they think that it is just this thing you have to do a writing test and you have to go through.
I think you can stand up in front of a class and say, all right, well, here's the process, this is why it's important, but it still seems to take time for students to actually get to the point where they realize that it is an important skill.
Zeroing in on your audience and listening to what they have to say about what they want.
My absolute favorite writing assignment is a mini ethnography that students usually do toward the end of the semester. But for that paper, students go out and they have to discover about their discipline. They have to interview one or two people who say for instance they're going to be a biology major. They have to interview maybe a professor in biology and another student in biology. They also have to do field research where they go out and they explore what it takes to actually be a biologist. You know, in addition to interviewing people, they have to go be part of a lecture or a biology group. They also have to figure out the requirements to get the degree in biology, and then they have to figure out what's expected of them once they actually get the degree and they're ready to enter the job market.
Another assignment that I've liked a lot in a class is where I have the students writing to a non-expert. So writing a proof of something to Wile E. Coyote about a question that he has, or to Homer Simpson about a question that he has. So for me, if I can make the proof into something creative, something that has some meaning to the students in some way, then I like what they come up with, because that gives them a chance to be more elegant and more creative in their presentation.
I developed an assignment where they have to go out onto the internet and find a business plan, because there's hundreds of them out there for some business that, you know, potentially they could be interested in starting. This past semester was my first run of that assignment, and they were so enthusiastic about it, and their letters were so much better than they had ever been, because they had that personal investment with the topic, and they understood their topics better because it's in stuff that they knew about. Here I am getting these letters from my students who care about these businesses. They're learning about the business plans, and I'm learning about the different kinds of businesses too. It's fun. It's fun to read. It's fun to grade.
The purpose of this film is to help you understand how writing fits into your program of undergraduate study at Appalachian. Whatever your discipline, you'll understand it better through writing. Whether you're preparing to be a physicist, a psychologist, an actor, a physical therapist, or a philosopher, you'll also see yourself as a writer.